Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the new moon in Libra that's coming up on the. Oh, I've just forgotten the date, but I'll bring up the chart shortly. It's in a few days' time anyway. Okay, there's a few things to cover today. Mercury Retrograde, picking up the square to Pluto and Eris, of course. The month of October, as it's been discussed widely in all the astrological community, pretty much every astrologer knows just how important the month of October is. We've known that for quite some time. Things are amplifying to the absolute hilt. There's no question about that. Emotions are extremely raw and intense and vulnerable and strong and powerful and sensitive, and you name it, it's all happening. I was just actually watching a live stream in Melbourne, Australia, with some protests that just took place just in the last couple of hours. Quite heartbreaking, actually, because just a reminder, heartbreaking in a sense, but inevitable and expected as well. Heartbreaking from the point of view, it's been voiced here through the politicians in this particular state and city, Melbourne, Australia, that every single worker, authorized worker, as they've put it, must comply to having something put into their body that they don't want to. I'm talking about school teachers, nurses, doctors. There's a whole range of people. And basically, if they don't comply, they're going to lose their employment. And so I was thinking about a lot of different things, of course, and one thing that just sort of flashed into my mind whilst I was kind of putting all this material together for this video was Uranus in Taurus, which has been in there for quite some time now, but we're only almost halfway through. We've still got a few more years left of Uranus in Taurus, and Uranus in Taurus has destabilized the earth, as it were. It's destabilized our very survival. It's put a shock into the earth plane, into the soul of the earth, and into every single soul from the point of view of our own very survival. And it's very literal in the sense of Uranus has to do with shock and trauma and freedom and liberation and stepping outside of the consensus reality and being authentic to what feels true and authentic for you. And I just couldn't help noticing again that one of the more consistent slogans in protesting universally is "My body, my choice," right? And I sort of made the connection today very strongly with Uranus in Taurus, because Uranus is about freedom and Taurus is your physical body, literally, so we are living in such historical, profound times of our entire existence, and we are witnessing, collectively, this desire to need and desire to be free in the choices that we make relative to our survival and our physical body, which is Taurus. It's just so, astrology is so incredible in so many ways, but in so many ways and so many times we see the archetypes, the language of astrology, which astrology is a language. And that's, when you understand astrology, you see it in everything, everyone, all around you, all the time, because it's a language. So our entire existence and experience can be understood through the language of astrology. It's just about understanding the archetypes and the symbols. So when you look around and you see slogans, big, banners that people are holding and protesting with, peacefully protesting, by the way, with the words, "My body, my choice." My choice comes from, it's a very Aries, you could say, desire, because it's my choice. Mine, my I is Aries, right? Of course. But the choice that is the choice that appears to be taken off the table for so many people is the freedom of choice as to what happens to our body and our livelihood, which is Taurus. And of course, Uranus is freedom. So anyway, just making that connection this morning was, it was a bit of a boom, boom kind of moment, right? So there are a lot of things to cover. The new moon in Libra is a very, very, the last few months, every full moon and every new moon has been extremely powerful, extremely significant. Not that any other new moon and full moon isn't, but we know with there's a splitting of timelines, which we could say there's a fork in the road, and that basically the fork in the road is a very good example or metaphor for the planetary aspect called a yod. And in this new moon chart, there is a yod actually. There are some other more significant aspects, simply because the yod is made up with Pallas Athena as being part of the yod. And I would have preferred that there was a planet there, but still, needless to say, Pallas Athena is extremely important. However, Pallas Athena has so much more to do with visions and fighting for justice, of course, through wisdom and education. So for that reason, she's extremely important. But nevertheless, a yod with Pluto in there, would be much much more impactful, I think. Anyway, regardless, this new moon does speak to a fork in the road from the point of view of it's in Libra, right? So we have the sun and moon in Libra. That's a new moon, okay? And we also have the planet Mars there as well. And the new moon is actually opposite Chiron, okay, and forming a square to Pluto. So this is powerful energies, powerful energies. The full moon, which comes up a couple of weeks later in Aries, carries with it the same signature in terms of a T-square, right? So it's actually square Pluto and Eris. So Pluto, Eris, and Chiron, very strong energies and signatures in the new moon and the full moon. So the new moon kicks it off with the sun moon conjunct Mars, because Mars is in Libra. And I'll bring up the chart in a moment so we'll get a clearer sort of perspective. And Mars in Libra is, well, there's a few layers to this. We've got the sun and the moon, which is the feminine and the masculine, just to use some language that describes a particular frequency. We're not talking about man, woman necessarily, but just yin yang energy. And Mars is without question, a yang energy. Now, Mars in Libra is in its detriment. However, a Sun-Mars conjunction, and we have a Sun-Moon-Mars conjunction, triple conjunction, right? And that they are all at the 13th degree. And there are, in astrology, there is a concept which is called critical degrees. And the 13th degree of cardinal signs is exactly that. It's a critical degree. So this new moon sits on a critical degree with Mars, the planet of initiation, desires, war, anger, fighting in Libra, fighting for justice and fairness and equality and peace and harmony, as much as that sounds contradictory, fighting for peace. But I guess we do have to fight for our own peace. And sometimes that fight happens internally and sometimes that fight happens externally. And at the moment it's happening in, I think equally in both ways. And the Sabian symbol for the new moon is very interesting because it actually is speaking to that necessity for some rest, actually, because the amount of energies that are explosive at the moment are incredibly volatile, intense, and difficult to manage as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of people, including myself, just having trouble sleeping, for instance, because the frequencies that are coming through are so, again, for lack of a better word, are so intense and so dramatic in the 3D reality, extremely dramatic. And because people's livelihood is at stake here, naturally the emotional body, the etheric body where all the chakras reside as well, everything is just amplified to the hilt. And people are having an incredibly strong reaction and response to the nature of the 3D reality. But everything is happening the way it's supposed to be happening. We just always need to stand back and remember the bigger picture as well. Eris squaring Pluto, massive implications. There's been 5 squares in total. We're just about to step into the 5th one this month on the, when is it? 9th of October is the final square between Eris and Pluto relative to the exact degree and minute. But because those slow moving bodies move so slowly, it's safe to say that in 2022, the energy of Pluto Eris will still be fairly substantial. But nevertheless, the final square occurs just in a few days' time. So, there's a lot going on in the month of October with Pluto, Mars, Eris, Sun, and cardinal signs. Cardinal energy is always about change. It's about action and initiation. It doesn't allow people to, it's not an energy that would make one feel, if you like, or not make one feel, but it's not an energy that is in the ether, that describes just sitting back and doing nothing. It's an energy that's very provoking, right? But at the same time, we do need to understand that initiation and courage, because courage is a big, 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 big key word here with this new moon, because Mars is with the new moon, and we have to show tremendous courage in our own evolutionary journey and path, right? And so whatever path we choose, the fork in the road is clearly becoming a lot more divided at each moment, each second, each day, right? And so whatever road we choose in that fork is the one we choose, right? And the Libran archetype is bringing up very strongly into our consciousness the diverse, if you like, or different levels of how to view things and weighing everything up as well. That's the whole point of Libra. I mean, Libra is seeking to become integrated through a level of balance of understanding one's own self, but equally having the ability to understand the other, the opposition, if you like. So it is about this very important integration of self and other, being able to stand in your own power, in your own sovereignty, in your own individuality, Aries, and also being able to accommodate the opposition, Libra, right? So, and Mercury going stationary retrograde a few days ago in Libra, squaring Pluto, is bringing in a massive content collectively of exposure. Pluto exposes what's hidden, okay? Pluto exposes whatever is hidden in the underworld. Now, the underworld has many, many different layers, evolutionary wise and spiritually wise. It takes us into the deeper components of our own soul structure and what our soul is intending to evolve through, of course, and that's our own personal journey. But relative to the collective energy and paradigm at the moment, the Mercury in in Libra squaring Pluto is going to really add a very important layer of information that will expose a lot of what's been hidden. Okay, so there's some incredibly powerful energies just unfolding every second. It's just really, really intense, to say the least. As well in October, as most of you are aware, we have we have 4 planets actually changing direction, right? So Pluto will be stationary direct in October. Jupiter will also do the same. Saturn will do the same, and then Mercury will do the same as well. So there's, when planets Well, let me just say this about Mercury. Mercury retrograde in Libra, forming a square to, well, Pluto and Eris, really, is a pretty serious mental consideration of weighing everything up in your life, from a mental point of view, like really thinking about it, but actually making choices and taking action as well. Sometimes people think that during a retrograde cycle, because it's turning within, which implies a reflective process and period, sometimes people think that that's not the time to act, but that's not necessarily correct. I've seen many times, particularly when Mercury is stationary retrograde, and the stationary period, whether it's retrograde or direct, is a real hot zone. Even though it's stationary, means it's like it's stopped dead in its tracks, if you like, but the energy in that portal is so extremely powerful, and that's where a click happens mentally, with the decision that you make, for instance. That happened to me very recently with something quite significant in my life as well. So Mercury retrograde in Libra will definitely assist us in a process of mentally analyzing and working through where perhaps certain, we could say relationships, for instance, have been imbalanced in some kind of way, right? Just to use very basic and simple language. Libra is always pointing us to where we need to cultivate further balance. And so in order to recognize where things are in balance, we need to recognize, in order to recognize where we need to integrate more balance, we also need to be able to recognize what is actually unbalanced. So, Mercury going retrograde is basically honing in on all those levels in our life. And it is square Pluto and Eris. So it's a bit of a rebirth, death rebirth process. It's a very intense mental process. Mercury in Libra is wonderful, actually. It doesn't have any dignity, debility, or any dignity or debility. It's just a very good place for Mercury because it has the ability to encapsulate the balance, the scales, both sides to any situation, and ultimately insert or interject the correct right action of balance that it actually needs on anything that it is actually thinking about, right? And with Pluto there's bound to be some really powerful, intense mental concentration and mental purging that's going to take place. Let me just bring up the chart, actually, that we are going to be looking at. Okay. Yes, here it is here, except I don't have that at the right degree. I must have been playing around with it. Well, anyway, just imagine that the moon is 13, because that's where it will be. Okay, the new moon is at 13 degrees of Libra. So, okay, let me just grab some tools of assistance. All right, I've changed my tablecloth and it feels really awkward with the mouse. So just bear with me while I... Come on, mouse. Okay, there we go. So there's the new moon in Libra, sun, moon. Okay, as I said, imagine that the moon is at 13 degrees as well. Mars is at 13 degrees. So again, as I said, 13 degrees is a critical degree in astrology, right? Critical degrees can mean a lot of different things, and the name is really what gives it away. It's critical, very critical. So what we begin during this new moon cycle, in terms of the seeds we plant, the most obvious thing for a new moon is planting seeds, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be until we have a full moon, as it were. Okay, so, and that happens 2 weeks later in Aries. So we're talking about the Aries Libra polarity and archetype here, which is very much about the standing in your own autonomy, identity, freedom, and being able to integrate the opposition, the other person, but not seeing it as an opposition necessarily, but rather being able to integrate that as a whole, right? Sun Mars conjunctions are extremely powerful energy, extremely powerful. We also have Pluto actually forming a square to this new moon as well. And we also have Chiron forming an opposition to this new moon. So in fact, what we have is a T-square. Okay, so a very powerful T-square in this new moon, and 2 weeks later we're going to see a T-square again with the full moon and Pluto. And well, let me just see, I've just forgotten. Must be, I've just had a memory lapse. Anyway, I'll get back to that. That's not till 2 weeks later anyway, but I just want to highlight that the configuration of a T-square is really powerful in the new moon chart, the new moon cycle, and the full moon that's going to come up in 2 weeks' time. So that within itself is an indication, an implication that this month is very intense, very crucial, 13 degrees, critical degree, cardinal signs. Cardinal is about action. Don't forget though, the action component, especially because Mars is in Libra, which means, you know, deliberating and contemplating and reflecting, and not just being completely impulsive and being total, sort of being in total rage, if you like, with the level of unfairness and injustice that's going on, because that kind of rage, which is very raw Aries energy, whilst at sometimes it's necessary, if you like, and sometimes it's just what happens from the point of view of our own evolution and critical reasoning skills, we've got to think about where we are injecting our energy, what we are injecting our energy into, what is the purpose of that, and what is the likely outcome, what is the outcome we're actually looking for. So we have to apply very critical reasoning skills. Mercury in Libra is extraordinary for the ability to be totally objective and view both sides to every situation from a very detached level and not being emotional about it. That's the real vantage point with Mercury in Libra. And because there's such high, you know, emotion and intensity with the 3D drama at the moment, we really need the assistance of this Libran archetype coming through to help us stay somewhat balanced in the absolute freaking chaos and madness of what's going on in 3D reality, right? Chiron forming an opposition to this new moon as well is clearly very important, because it's picking up that square to Pluto, and Pluto's square to the new moon. So it's a T square, and Pluto's at the apex of the T square. So Pluto is the driver, the decider, the one that's holding the energy of this configuration of a T square. And what's Pluto about? Pluto is about diving and plunging deep into our soul's desires, our deepest fears, where we are not comfortable to go. Pluto is not, it's not a comfortable energy. It's far from comfortable. If you want to talk about comfort, then, you know, look to Venus. But Pluto is not comfortable. Pluto is always about some kind of death and transformation and letting something go. We know that, we hear about it all the time, but unless you are, you know, experiencing that very personally, it just becomes language and words that you hear. And that reminds me, I just would like to give an example of, at the moment with this collective narrative, this intense 3D drama that's going on, whilst on a collective level, it's chaotic, it's dramatic, there's injustice everywhere, there's all sorts of things going on. There's amazing things going on as well from the point of view of people who are extremely resilient, and who are the warriors and the fighters, and the people who feel it's part of their evolutionary journey to stand up for what they stand up for. You know, we all have a different role to play. And so there's there is a world of a lot of great things happening as well, but we don't get to see them a lot because unfortunately the 3D reality version of things is not showing people that. And so this is where we need to make a choice to tune out of the 3D drama as it's presented by mainstream media, because again, if we stay at that level, the only thing we're going to do is injure our health. That's the only thing we're going to do. So we can get totally overwhelmed and dragged into that and sucked into that narrative, or we can take a position of finding an inner sense of peace and harmony and balance, which is what Libra enables us to cultivate, right? Internally and externally, because we have choice in what we choose to listen to, what we choose to look at, and what we choose to do as well. Even though the choices at the moment appear to be quite limited on a large scale, I completely understand that, but we still have a choice. And one other thing that I wanted to just kind of share here, there's my Sabian symbol book falling apart. This is about Eris and Pluto energy, and it's something that I'd like to read from my book. Since Eris is portrayed in Greek mythology as the sister and the follower of the war god Mars, she's naturally labeled chaos and discord. Chaos follows war. We are in a war at the moment. It's a biochemical war. It's also a war in our consciousness, because we are being called and asked to raise our frequency and our consciousness at the most trying times of our entire existence. When you're talking about a collective evolutionary shift, a timeline splitting, and we are either going in that way or that way, that's not going to come without cataclysmic events, and that's what's happening. So again, it's just an important thing to remember. That's bigger picture stuff, because even though it seems so doom and gloom at the moment, this is not permanent. Nothing is permanent. Just to finish this comment here, with Pluto too comes chaos, certainly with Uranus. But this is not the real point, he says, and I'll tell you what the book is in a minute, because many people usually ask me, where am I reading from? He says, as a wise man once told me, recognizing that the chaos associated with the destructive power of Pluto precedes new birth. Do not focus on the chaos, but await the birth or the rebirth. And I really love that comment. That's actually from the book on Eris, the goddess Eris. In case you couldn't read that, it's called The 10th Planet by Henry Seltzer. I have referenced this book previously. So again, when you're talking about a collective evolutionary shift in consciousness, that's not going to come through in an easy way. It's going to come through severe cataclysmic events, because we're talking about the entire human race, the collective soul of the planet, the Earth herself. That's huge. Imagine the energy. Think about the energy in your own body, the energy that you feel moment to moment, which includes a lot of different levels, of course, which we can talk about: mental energy, physical energy, spiritual energy, heart energy, soul energy. There's our moods, there's so many levels to our energetic spheres, the magnetic field around our body, the magnetic field around our heart, all these things. We are all made of energy. So, multiply that by, 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion souls, right? And the Earth herself, the energy that she actually has within her, retained within her, as the process of evolution has been going on. There's a clearing, the biggest clearing, if you like, certainly of our entire existence, and certainly even historically as well. Whilst there are many historical moments where there's been huge cataclysmic protests for freedom and pro-choice and things of that nature. But we've reached a different point of evolution. Okay, so whilst I went a little bit off track there, still very, very important. That's what I was getting at. I just wanted to say that because I work with people on a daily basis, more or less, through astrological readings and so forth, and because I'm looking at, the astrological charts all the time and whatever, it's become so clear to me that even though there's this evolutionary transition, cataclysmic transmission, that has created a pretty powerful narrative on the 3D Earth plane, and it has most people by the throat, right? Unfortunately, which is Saturn. That is Saturn. Saturn square Uranus. We've got one more hit in December. So expect things to be ramped up so much more. It's inevitable, inevitable. There's no two ways about it. It's my favorite saying for Aries, because Aries is one way, right? Libra is two ways. But in terms of what's actually happening here, there's no two ways about it. We've got one more hit of Uranus square Saturn. We've got another hit of Pluto square Eris. These dynamic cycles and energies, they don't come around every day, But I've done a few readings, of late of people. And so I wanted to give you guys some, an inspirational kind of message here as well. With Pluto, when you have Pluto transits, right, your life changes. It changes you forever. It literally just changes you forever. The way that's going to change you in exactly what area and what's going to happen and so forth, that is an individual thing. But here's the thing that I want to say. People who are having transiting Pluto squaring things in their chart at the moment, squaring any of the angles in your chart, or squaring any of your planets in your chart, or even an opposition and certainly a conjunction, the cataclysmic narrative in this 3D reality is felt to the absolute hilt. It's do or die, basically, right? It's ripping everything and taking you back to the absolute essence and your core. And it's causing us to, if you like, or reminding us or pushing us into this field where we can actually truly see our own sovereign power without being, without identifying it to the physical and material plane, right? Because it's like a forced energy that comes in and it strips you away of virtually everything. And so what are you left with? You are left with the true, sovereign, infinite, powerful being that you are. And here's your chance to actually see that now. But the journey is cataclysmic, intense, painful, scary. It's a lot of different things. But then there are people on the planet, many people, and I've done readings for a few of them recently, who are having Pluto forming trine aspects to things in their chart. And even in amidst this complete chaos where there appears to be so many limitations and blocks and difficulties and very little choice and so on and so forth, these individuals have just, the circumstances that have flowed into their life have been incredibly transformative, even to the physical level. One person I knew about who was literally basically homeless, okay, and through this period ended up finding the appropriate support that enabled him to move into a particular place that is beyond what you'd expect, and blah blah blah. Another person I know, he was in a situation where, again, real estate accommodation was an issue, blah 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 blah. Anyway, I won't go into the details because then it becomes a bit too personal, and I don't want to speak about personal sort of circumstances of people that I know or I've worked with. But anyway, this person ended up with a situation where the home real estate situation just worked out perfectly. They're practically given a house, okay, if I can just put it simply like that. why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because the reality is that we all, first of all, we all have an individual perspective of reality, regardless of the large 3D narrative that's playing out. We all, even within that, we all have our own perspective. Then we all have our own individual understanding perspective of our own journey, our evolutionary path, and everything that's going on within that. And so when you have this narrative playing out that's huge, absolutely huge, that's changing the face of everything, right? We also have within that a mixture of people that will be experiencing that in the most dynamic ways that you could ever imagine. And then we have a pool of people that are actually able to, with transits from Pluto from a trine sextile perspective, are able to actually experience that energy in a much more fluid manner, if you like. Never underestimate trine aspects. This is the point I'm trying to make, and especially by Pluto. Pluto trines will change your life in a way where you need to be engaged and interactive with the energy, but it's not like pulling teeth out. It's not like being thrown into, a tumble dryer and being thrown around everywhere, which would be the Pluto square, or the whole foundation being pulled from under your feet and being thrown back to your absolute essential core and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on and how am I going to manage this and how am I going to survive and how am I going to live and so on and so forth. But, through history, people have proven time and time again just how resilient the spirit, the soul and the spirit is just so resilient. So my message about this part of the reading today is that even no matter how bad it seems, we will survive and we will be triumph and we will be victorious and we will move forward into a new reality. That's going to happen. We can either embrace that journey in our own unique individual way as best as we can, or we can deny or resist or whatever. The denying and the resistance only makes the journey so much harder. So it's really about getting very clear about what it is you wish to choose and why. And that may mean making sacrifices and so on and so forth. One thing I've learned in my life, just when everything seems like it's gone to shit and it's so dark and you can't see anything but darkness, because I've been in that space and I was in it for a long time. And that happened when my father transcended this earth plane. I was literally just seeing black everywhere. I couldn't see anything but darkness. So I've lived that. I've been there and I was there for quite a while. And when you feel that there's just nothing, on the other side, there's a total, utter, complete rebirth. And that rebirth is so magical, so beautiful, so powerful, and it is there. It is there. And that's what is there for us when we get through to the other side of this 3D chaos. And I just want us all to remember that, especially when we're having really troubled and dark times, whatever the situation may be, because we all have a unique situation, don't we? And I guess with this new moon, well, the square from Pluto is saying that, there's a deep sense of conflict, a deep sense of needing to die to certain things, needing to die to certain situations. And we have a choice, but whichever choice we make, that there's a sense of some kind of death that goes on. So it just means you have to choose what it is you want for you. I in this live that I was watching before I came on today, I was listening to a school teacher. She may have been in her 30s, 40s, I don't know, because she didn't want to be filmed. I just heard her voice. And she was just devastated. devastated, crying. And basically, she was communicating that she teaches 9-year-old kids at school, and she was so so distressed about the distress that kids have been through since this whole thing began nearly 2 years ago. Just how much they've suffered, these little kids, they're just little kids, this is, but on the other hand, their soul chose to be born during this time. So there's something within them that chose to want to evolve through these very specific and exact circumstances and narrative, right? There is that, but there is the heartfelt side to all of us when we witness suffering, and especially communities that are vulnerable, such as the elderly and children, which to me are the two most vulnerable levels of people on the planet. They are always the most vulnerable, and so my heart always strongly goes out to those groups of people. And it's so hurtful that I just have to I really have to get to a point where I just shut it off, because I will just be basically wiped out. But anyway, this school teacher, she was just saying that the distress that she's gone through witnessing the distress of these 9-year-olds. And now she's at a point in her life, she's at the fork in the road, the yod, where she's based in this state, in this country. If you are a school teacher, you have to comply to something that you don't want to, all right, in terms of putting something into your body. And if she doesn't comply, she will lose her job, just like thousands and thousands and thousands of other people. And the amount of distress that I heard in this woman's voice, it was literally hurting my heart and soul. But I did listen to it regardless. The point is that there are many people, everyone is going through this in their own way, in their own version, and people will make the choice that their soul feels is right to make, regardless. And so, again, there is no right or wrong, but at the same time, I think right and wrong is very much a Gemini concept. And in the world of 3D duality, there's this need for the mind to split everything up into right, wrong, good, and bad, which is basically Gemini. And whilst that is appropriate in a lot of different ways, it's wrong to go through a red light only because you might kill yourself or kill somebody else, not because you're going to get a fine, because the fine component to it is just it's just a government thing, which adds, more funds into their pockets, right? We know that. But is it wrong to go through a red light because you might put yourself or somebody else in danger? Of course it is. That's a no-brainer, right? But we're not talking about that level of right or wrong here. We're talking about the deeper components of what truly resonates inside your heart and soul with what feels right to you. Again, we're going to feel a sense of coercion from the mental perceptions of what we are identifying and what we are seeing. We're going to have to smash through that. Mercury square Pluto retrograde assists us in that journey, smashing through the bullshit, basically. Pluto exposes the bullshit, shows you the truth. Are you ready to see the truth? If you're not, you're not. If you are, you are. If you are, here it is. It's right here, right now, right? But that truth is an individual thing as well. Like I like to say, truth is a pathless land, Krishnamurti. So with this new moon, I see a lot of inner potential conflict and tension that we feel, we're feeling sort of squeezed, there's this sense of feeling squeezed and pushed and cornered. And that squeezing and pushing and cornering is what's going to, I think, be the catalyst for the choice that we make. And the choice that we make has to feel integral for ourselves. It has to feel integral, not incongruent with what you really feel and believe. See, this is where faith and trust is completely tested. Your faith is being completely tested here because there's nothing to hang on to out there at the moment that is secure, that feels safe. And in infinitely speaking, nothing is permanent anyway, but we are experiencing an incredibly amplified, condensed version of insecurity. And so we are thrown back onto our inner resources. And the new moon in Libra it's showing you the scales, the imbalances that are there, may be there, have been there. Well, it will show us as the month unfolds. Mercury in Libra is already taking us through that journey with our mental perceptions anyway. And then the opposition to Chiron, of course, that can bring in the level of how we might be able to heal some of these imbalances, particularly in our relationships, Libra, because there's a lot of people are experiencing deeply hurtful, painful situations in their relationships, whether it's a personal relationship, family, whatever it is, basically largely due to a different perception, belief, or choice, and the conflict that's bringing up in people's lives, because everyone is just spinning out of control, and it's difficult to know, I suppose, what's right, what's wrong. Am I right? Are they wrong? Are they wrong? Am I right? You know, blah, blah, blah. And there is no right or wrong. You just need to be able to be integral, congruent, authentic in what you stand in and what you believe, regardless of anything or anybody else. But getting back to this Chiron, this can be an opportunity for a remedy, for some healing to begin through this new moon cycle, right, for the next month. On the other hand, the fact is that Chiron also exposes our deepest wounds as well. So this Chiron opposite the new moon, which is in Libra and Chiron is in Aries, it can bring up our own individual personal wounded material in our relationships at the moment, right? So there is that. There's always that with Chiron. You can't have one with the other. It's always there's two sides to that coin, always. Pluto is going to add a very intense do or die type of energy, right? And then as we proceed forward, as I said, the full moon in Aries is going to have a square to Pluto. So the T-square comes in twice in this lunation cycle by Pluto. We can't, that's an energy that no one can deny, avoid, suppress, resist, ignore. We will all feel it individually and collectively. So the 7th of October, Pluto is stationary direct. 11th of October, Saturn is stationary direct. 18th of October, Jupiter is stationary direct. 19th of October, Mercury is stationary direct. And on the 17th of October, and I'll show you what that looks like. 17th of October, here we go. All right. Pluto, Mars, Eris. This is a very dangerous combination in this 3D drama and reality. On the other hand, it is the most pivotal, powerful, undeniable force and energy for the will of the soul to push and penetrate through, which will manifest in numerous ways, but particularly in ways of exposing, because again, we have Pluto here. Pluto is always about exposing the bullshit to ourselves and in the world. This is an incredibly as I said, dangerous energy, but it is one of the energies that when things are going to actually really happen and really like the earth is going to shift, something massive is going to basically shift the whole ether, if you like. Well, this is it, this energy here. So 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and so forth, these few days are going to be absolutely pivotal for whatever it produces, which is going to be so dynamic and intense, is going to speak and ripple into the future moving forward with no uncertain terms. Sun, Mars, Pluto, Mars, Pluto, Sun, you know, these are individuals that you cannot corner them. They will not back down. Now, that can play out on both ends of the pendulum, can't it? That can play out with the 3D level of authoritarian figures, and that can also play out individually, and indeed it will. Yeah, there you go. So the two, in fact, we've got 3 planets of will. The Sun, Mars, and Pluto are all planets of will forces, willpower, the desire to initiate, the desire to push through whatever is there. You can't stop a Pluto, Sun, Mars energy, nor can you stop the Eris energy. So this line up here in cardinal signs, now whilst Libra is essentially seeking to cultivate peace, it is still a cardinal sign, which means Libra, on the one hand, it sits back on the fence and takes this pose or poise of deliberation, and it has to, but boy, when it's ready to make that decision, it's all there. It's sharp, it's ready to initiate, and it's ready to go. All the cardinal signs are about taking action and initiative. And here we have a T-square. T-squares, which involves at least 3 planets or more, is an incredibly tense, provoking configuration that produces action and change. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the rest of this month is more chaotic, more dramatic, more dynamic, more challenging, more difficult. You know, hold on to your hat. Get ready for a really intense ride. But just know that it's going to lead to the appropriate right course of change that is taking place, that needs to take place. Let me see, what else do I have here? The Sabian symbol for the new moon, it's really interesting actually. There's 2 things we kind of need to consider though. And that is that this new moon involves Mars and all those planets, Mars, Sun, Moon, being on a critical degree. Critical means critical. It's you know, it's self-explanatory. Again, the Mars with the new moon is asking us to initiate the balance that we need in our life. Which are we going to choose? And Mars gives us the courage to implement the will that we need. So it's a very critical new moon. Very, very, very critical. I can't say enough about that. On the other hand, however, the Sabian symbol talks about basically, it says the cultural fantasies, pardon me, that's the wrong one. 14th degree of Libra is what we have to read. In the heat of the noon hour, a man takes a siesta. Now, these are all, you know, metaphors that we need to psychically and intuitively and through imagination interpret relative to, in this case, a new moon conjunct Mars. So I think it's giving us a bit of a clue to take some rest around this new moon, because the narrative that's going to come through for the rest of the month is going to be freaking explosive, and there's going to be so much energy dispersed, and whether you are actively engaged in that on an external level or not, you will feel it. We all will. And so this is kind of like saying, you know what, new moon, critical degree with Mars, square Pluto, opposite Chiron. Give yourself some time to actually rest, because there's a lot to come for the rest of this month. And that's not meant to make anybody feel uneasy or uncomfortable or scared. It's not about that at all. It's really just about making us aware that there's a lot is going to happen for the rest of this year. In fact, so much is being pushed and squeezed into these last few months of this year, including a solar eclipse coming up in December, Saturn square Uranus, last square in December. You know, there's so much happening this month. There's just so much happening on every single level. And if we don't take the caution, the suggestion here, which is take a siesta, have some chill time. That doesn't mean you're giving up, giving in, you know, complying. That just means you're being smart about how you are going to use your energy. Because this next month is going to take a lot of our energy on so many different ways, so many different levels. So that's how I interpret that. And I didn't read the rest of it, because basically that key note is just expanded on right in the further sentences. But that's it in a nutshell. That's basically what it's speaking to. Prepare yourself, because this month is going to be absolutely explosive. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to come back and talk about the Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury all going direct. I may discuss them in one video altogether, or I may just do a couple. I'll see how I go. But yeah, just, I mean, take whatever, you know, whatever you will out of this, whatever was useful, and just know and trust your higher soul. You know how there's, I mean, I've noticed the last couple of years, one of the most typical sort of phases or comments that people say to each other is, you know, I got you, I got you, I got your back, I've got you. It's become such a common expression in our sentences, in our vocabulary, and use that for your own self. Let yourself know that you've got yourself from your higher self, that is. You know, when you are being squeezed into this narrow path where things seem and feel impossible, just go into that higher self level and remind yourself from your higher self that your higher self has got you. It's got your back. Why has it got your back? Because it chose to be born for this life, this incarnation, this story, this, you know, historical, life-changing, evolutionary narrative. We all chose to be here. So your soul has got your back, always. And then, of course, we have the angels and the ascendant masters and divine source creation to all things. So trust, remind, remember, and rest, because this month is going to be absolutely the craziest month, I think, of the entire year. So I'm going to go and have a glass of wine, I think. It's the weekend. I think I need a day's rest perhaps tomorrow, and then I'll get back to my work again. I'll see you all soon with more. Sending you so much love and blessings, and stand in your true sovereign power. Your soul has got your back.